When reading plant labels and seed packets, you will often see the sun requirements for certain plants. The labels or seed packets will say that the sun requirement is full sun or partial shade or deep shade. These labels are given because all plants will have their sun condition preference. Some plants can tolerate shade and may even prefer the shade, and some plants will not tolerate shade at all, meaning they will die or fail to thrive if they are planted in the shade. So you can see how, when planning out what to grow and where to plant, you will need to take into consideration the sun parameters of the area you are planting or the sun requirements of what it is you want to grow. So, how do you know your sun needs? You need to observe the different areas in your yard and identify their sun needs. Full sun refers to an area that has sun all day, or at least 8 hours of sun a day. But basically, just if it has sun from the sunrise to the sunset, that's going to be your full sun areas. An area that is shaded for about half the day is called partial sun. And then in places that are shaded most of the day, that will be full shade or deep shade. This will be areas under pine trees or right next to a house. Be aware that it's really best to have an understanding of sun and not go strictly by how things are labeled. A plant label can give you a picture of what kind of plant you are dealing with, but they're not always exactly accurate. Let me give you an example. So, dahlias are usually labeled as full sun. But if you live in a place that gets really high heat for a long period of time in the middle of summer, then you might do well to plant your dahlias in a place that gets some afternoon shade during the hottest part of the day. On the flip side, if you live in a place with cool summers, you might put something that is usually considered to be more of a shade plant and give it a little more sun and heat. So remember that. High temps means you can get away with a little more shade than might be recommended. Also, sometimes a plant might like full sun the most, but it can still grow in a place that gets partial shade. On the other side of it, you might find things that are marked as preferred to be shaded. They can actually do well in sun. An example of that is hellebores that comes to mind. That they do well in shade, but they can actually live in sun as well. So this is where experience and experimenting in gardening comes in. The key is to have good foundational knowledge, and then with that knowledge, you can use it to make informed decisions for your own garden and climate, because all information that you get pertaining to gardening, you're going to need to tweak it just a little bit for your situation. So keep in mind that when it comes to growing food, you really just need that full sun. Flowers are much more forgiving when it comes to shade, but fruits and vegetables need that energy that comes from the sun. There are some exceptions. There are a few vegetables like lettuce and herbs that might tolerate a little shade if they have to, but even those are really going to prefer the sun. One little tip is that really most plants are going to do best with sun. Often, when a plant is labeled as part shade, it usually means that the plant can tolerate and grow in shade, but often, if it is in sun, it will really thrive. So, err on the side of sun if you can. Now, of course, there are plants that truly do not like being in full sun and will dry out and burn up. And those plants will usually be labeled as deep shade or full shade or shade lovers. So look for that. Read labels if you're new to gardening. Try to look for sun in your yard. Start to observe the plants around you and notice what grows well in shade and in sun in your area. Take note of what you like and observe the areas in your yard. And if you can, err on the side of sun, especially when it comes to growing food. Now, let me say, if you have a yard with a lot of trees and shade, then don't worry, there are still plenty of beautiful plants and flowers that can thrive in your yard. So, I know this is a really common thing. I have a lot of shade in my yard that I grow in, and I love those areas of my yard. Some of my favorite shade lovers are hydrangeas, foxglove, forget-me-nots, hellebores. I love ground covers like ivy or sweet woodruff. Hostas are really wonderful. And ferns are wonderful in shade. Mint and other herbs can often handle shade. Astilbes, bleeding heart, vinca, and I mean, I could go on. There are lots more, but hopefully, this list can give you a place to start if you're totally stumped when it comes to shade. Um, so, yeah, those are just a few recommendations for shade that I love that might give you a place to start.